are, Bunnahabhain. We were built in 1881 and our first spirit was produced 2 years later in 1883. The company called Highland Distillers bought the place in 1887 and we were under the ownership of them all the way up till 2003 when we were sold on to a company called Burns Stewart, who are now in ownership of Bunnahabhain. They also own Tobermory Distillery on Mull and Deanston Distillery, which is in Doon on the mainland. So, as opposed to being part of a very large group with lots of other single malt producers, we're now part of a much smaller group and we're probably the most well-known brand within that group now. So there's a lot of changes being made at Bunnahabhain, but the production side of things and what we do here at the actual distilleries never really changed the whole time. So you get a chance to see things happening today inside the distillery, and here we are now in the mill room. This is where the whole process starts. Here inside the mill. Now, through this wall here we have a storage house. In there are 15 bins, each one has a 60-ton capacity. So there's plenty of barley stored through there for us to then bring through here and use. Now, the barley that we use in Bunnahabhain comes from a company called Simpson's, who are based in Berwick-upon-Tweed. Simpson's specialise in producing a barley which has a very low peat specification. Basically what that means is during the malting process what they're going to do is soak the barley on large floors to begin the germination. Once that starts, they're then going to fire it from underneath to dry out the moisture. Depending on how much peat you use inside that fire depends on how peaty your whisky tastes. Here at Bunnahabhain we produce the least peated of all the Islay malts, so that's why we take our barley from them. You'll find that distilleries such as Lafroy, Ardbeg, Lagavulin even, with a peatier taste, they take their barley from the Diageo plant in Portellen. If we were going to do a peated version of Bunnahabhain, we would also take Diageo barley as well, but the rest of it comes from Berwick. Now, inside the actual mill what we have are two large sets of rollers. So we have a top set here and a bottom set down here. Each roller weighs about half a tonne. So there's 2 tonnes of milling power inside this machine, so it can do vast amounts of barley at any one time. The rollers in here can be set accordingly, so it depends on what kind of batch we're dealing with. If we're dealing with a very tight batch of barley, the rollers will be set closer together. Vice versa, if it's a looser batch and there's a lot of flour in there, the rollers will be set slightly further apart, so it's not going to have to work so hard. Once we're finished in here, we're going to be left with 13 tonnes of grist, which is barley which has been milled, it's had its husk removed and it's been broken down into a rough powder form. So we can take that 13 tonnes of grist upstairs to the mash house where we can begin to add water to extract all the sugar and starch that we need for fermentation. Mash on Islay, this is subsequently the biggest mash tun as well, so you won't see a bigger example of one of these on this island. Now what we're going to do here is bring the grist through this bucket system, we're going to fill it into the tun. Then we're going to start adding the worts. Wort is the term that we use for a batch of water that goes in or comes out of the tun. So altogether we're going to put 4 worts through here. The first one is going to go in, that 45,000 litres of hot water at 80 degrees will be added in. About 6,000 or 7,000 litres of cold water will then go in. This will reduce the temperature to 64 degrees. Then we're going to begin to mash. Now what we have inside there are a system of rakes. The rakes work together to mix the grist and the hot water to extract all the sugar and all the starch. Now, once we've mashed it, we drain it out. We've got a false bottom in there, which allows us to keep the liquid outside and keep the solid in. A second wort will be added after that, again at 80 degrees. We'll mash it and drain it out. A third wort and a fourth wort, both at 90 degrees this time. Now, it's not always common practice to have 4 worts going through your mash tun. But when you've got one this size, it makes sense to put an extra water through just to get all the goodness out. Now, the actual water that we're putting in here, and the water that's used all over the distillery and all over the village as a whole, comes from the Margadale Spring, which is in the mountains behind the distillery. We're the only distillery again on the island to have its own spring, specifically for use in whisky production, so we're very lucky in that respect. It runs off the hill over a lot of rocks and a lot of shingle, so by the time it gets here it's very crisp and it's very clear, so it's perfect for going into the tun. Now, the first and the second worts that we put in there, once they've been drained out, we'll take them away to the levelling tank where we're going to cool them. The third and the fourth worts will be combined. Those will be put to one side and we will use those as the first wort of the next fresh mash. So the sugar content isn't going to be all that high in the third and fourth waters, but there is going to be a content. So as opposed to throwing it away, we're just going to keep it and use it next time round. So we're ready to move on to the says the box over here. So we're Now once we're finished mashing everything over there, the grist is still going to be inside the tun. Now after we've mashed it 3 or 4 times, we now call it draff. So the draff will be taken from the tun here and it will be stored outside. From there it will be sold on to farmers and they'll use it as a form of cattle feed. Now the first and second worts, as I said, are going to be brought and cooled. They're going to be brought into this tank here. This is the levelling tank. This has a capacity of about 4,000 or 5,000 litres. In total, about 66.5 are going to pass through it in terms of one wort from the tun. Now, once it's filled up in here, it's still going to be very hot. And the next thing that we want to do in the production is add yeast to begin the fermentation. Yeast is a living extract and like us, it wouldn't appreciate a mixture this hot. So we need to cool it down if we don't want the yeast to die. If we left it inside this tank it would take days to cool, so we need to speed that process up. This machine behind me here is the machine that we use to do that. This is the heat exchanger. Now, what we have inside the heat exchanger are a system of plates which are squashed together and they work with each other in order to cool this wort. How that works is, the wort is pumped from this tank into the heat exchanger and it's pumped down one side of each panel. The panels are flowing all the way along inside here. On the other side of the panel is cold water, which is pumped from a tank up above our heads. So the cold water and the wort don't mix, they don't touch each other, but they flow in really close proximity along either side of the plate, so that by the time we've passed all the wort through there, filled it back into the tank, it's then cool. The cold water that we put into the tank, the heat exchanger, comes out as hot water, so we can take it and use it in the mash tun. So in a sense what we're doing is creating a form of renewable energy for ourselves. And it is very important throughout the whole process that we try as hard as we can to keep wastage to a minimum, be as efficient as we possibly can, and basically not just to guzzle lots of energy and give nothing back. We want to try and be as environmentally friendly as we possibly can. Now, once we've passed everything through there, it's then filled back into here and it's then cool. So from here we take it upstairs again. This time it will go into wooden washbacks in the tun room so that we can add the yeast and begin the fermentation. So if you guys follow me again, we'll go to the tun room. Right, so welcome to the still house, everybody. These are our stills then, and as you can see we've got 4. So we've got 2 different types of stills, 1 of each in 2 sets. So we have the set over here that work together and the set across there that work together. Now, the slightly larger stills with the bigger bases and the windows on the necks are the wash stills. We're going to use those ones first. The smaller, more rounded ones, such as here and here, are the spirit stills, so they'll come in second. Now, what we're going to do here is bring that wash from upstairs in the washback and fill it into the wash still first of all. So we'll fill it up, we'll close the door over and we'll turn that wheel next to the still. When we do that, inside there, steam coils are going to begin to heat up. As they heat up, the mixture inside there is going to start boiling. So essentially it's not really all that different to the principle used when you're boiling your kettle. A heated element inside the mixture which causes it to boil. As it boils, the alcohol content inside there is going to start turning to vapour. So it's going to rise up the neck of the still in steam form. Once it gets to the top, it travels along the straight part that we call the swan's neck. And when it gets through this wall, it comes to a condenser. Now we can't see the condensers on the number 1 stills, but on the number 2 stills, we can see the condensers. Inside there what we have is a system of tubes which flow from top to bottom with cold water being pumped through them. So that as soon as the vapour comes into contact with those cold tubes, it condenses back into a liquid and falls to the bottom. We're going to collect all that liquid, and it's what we call low wine. So the low wine will be taken from the wash still condenser and it will go into the spirit still, where we'll start again as we did the last time. We'll fill it up, close the door, turn the wheel, and the steam coils will begin to boil the mixture. Again, it's going to boil, the vapour is going to rise off, hit a condenser and flow out as liquid. Now, unlike in the first stage where we had 1 batch of low wine that we then took on, in the second stage we're going to have 3 different types of alcohol. Now, the first one of those is what we call the 4 shots. 4 shots are the type of alcohol that tend to affect our head straight away. They're very dense, they're very heavy, lots of nasty chemicals such as ethanol, basically all the hangover material. That's where all that is in the foreshots. So we take that away. We don't put that into your whisky, so you don't have to worry. If you get a sore head from drinking Bunnahabhain, it means you just had too much. The second batch is what we call the middle cup. Now that's the very purest part right in the centre, basically the heart of the alcohol. That is where all the purest types of alcohol lie. That will be stored in a tank behind me, from where it will then be taken and put into casks. So essentially the middle cup is raw whisky. The third and final type of alcohol that's going to come out is the faints. Again, the faints aren't going into the whisky this time for similar reasons to the foreshots. They don't taste very good and they don't really have a good effect on people either. So again, we're taking those away. Now, rather than throw them away and start again, we take the foreshots and the faints, we mix them together with low wine and we put them back in and distill them again. That would continually happen. Each time we remove them, we put them back in. So no liquid from the still room is ever going to be thrown away. Unless it's middle cup, in which case it goes straight into a tank. If it's anything other than that, we just boil it back up again and take more good stuff out. That would just continually happen. Now, everything that's happening inside here is controlled from this area over here, the safes. It's all controlled by the still man, and he's going to do it all from over here. Now, obviously at this stage, all the liquid passing through here is clear, just like water. So there's no way of telling what it is simply by looking at it. So in order for the still man to judge what it is he's dealing with, be it foreshots, middle cut or faints, he's going to have to sample it. So what he's going to do is turn this little tap down here. Once he's done that, the glass inside there is going to fill with liquid from the spirit still condenser. Using the devices inside the glass, he can tell the strength and the temperature of the alcohol. Now, there's no set definition for middle cut. There's no law that says this is when you must collect it. Each distillery has its own opinion on that. Here at Bunnahabhain, we collect our middle cut between 72 and 64% at 20 degrees. The still man fills up that glass and he looks inside there and you can see that it's 75% and it's 24 degrees, then it's still foreshots. So he has to empty it out, wait a couple of minutes, fill it back up again and see if he's nearer to the middle cup. Now, the most important thing is, it doesn't really matter if a little bit of middle cut gets in with the low wine or in with the faints and the foreshots, because that's just going to go back in and we can take it back out again. What really matters is if we get faints or foreshots in the middle cut. That's what we really don't want, because if we do, it's pretty much useless. We only want the pure stuff for the whisky. So it's very important that this part of the process is done with great precision, which it is, because the men that work in this area of the distillery are highly skilled and highly experienced. Robin is the new guy, and he's been here for 25 years. All that was just in an effort to produce spirit. If you didn't bung it in here for 3 or 4 years, it wouldn't be whisky. So this is really the most magical part of the whole thing. What's going on inside these casks right now is real life whisky production. Now, inside the warehouses, what's the first thing that hits you when you come in? It's the smell. So we know that there's definitely whisky in here just from the sense of our noses. Now these casks, as I said, over in the filling store, down here on the ground floor, these are butts, 500 litre capacity. On the 2 floors above us will be predominantly hogsheads, 250 litres, they're about half the size. Now, the casks are made of oak. Oak is a wood and wood is porous. What that means is, for each year that it's in here, it's going to lose a certain percentage of its volume through evaporation. So approximately 1 to 1.5% of each cask will evaporate into the air each year. That 1 to 1.5% is what they call the angel's share of the whisky.